right, so get this. Guyana's 2025 budget is
huge.
Yeah, it's a whopping $1.382 trillion. We're not talking chicken feed here, folks. This is nation-changing money.
Hey.
So today we're diving deep into this behemoth of a budget with an article from Guyana News Update and all the the fiery debate swirling around it.
Yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? Guyana's on this incredible wave of economic growth because of its booming oil industry.
Yeah.
And this budget's like their roadmap for what they're going to do with all this newfound wealth.
Right, and it's not just about the numbers, though, right? This budget is shaping up to be a defining moment for Guyana's future.
Totally.
Like, are they on the path to sustainable prosperity?
Yeah.
Or is this just a short-term sugar rush?
Right.
We've got the ruling party, led by Dr. Bharat Jagdeo, painting this picture of a budget that benefits all Guyanese. But the opposition, specifically the AFC and APNU, are
not so much.
Yeah, they're singing a different tune, claiming it only lines the pockets of a select few.
Yeah. That's definitely a key tension to watch. It's a classic dilemma for countries going through rapid economic growth. How do you balance immediate needs with those long-term investments? And the opposition's argument is that the budget favors big infrastructure projects, you know, roads, bridges, all that, at the expense of addressing the immediate needs of the most vulnerable Guyanese.
Yeah, but Dr. Jagdeo is pushing back hard. He's calling those criticisms lazy rhetoric and challenging the opposition to pinpoint which communities shouldn't benefit from these infrastructure improvements. He's saying that these investments are crucial for long-term economic growth.
For sure.
And will ultimately benefit everyone.
It's an interesting argument, for sure. It's one we should examine closely. On one hand, investing in infrastructure can definitely create jobs and stimulate economic growth. Right. But you also need to consider the downsides, you know? What happens to those who are struggling to make ends meet today while all these long-term projects are being built?
Exactly. It's a balancing act. And speaking of balancing, let's look at where some of this money is actually going. Healthcare, education, and housing are getting a massive injection. $420 billion total.
Wow.
I mean, to put that into perspective,
that's like
giving every single person in Guyana a brand new scooter.
That's a significant chunk of change, no doubt. But is it enough? How does that spending compare to previous years or even to other countries in similar economic situations?
Yeah.
And most importantly, what kind of tangible difference will this make in the lives of ordinary Guyanese? Will it translate into better schools, improved healthcare access, and more affordable housing options?
Right. Those are the real questions. And of course, you've got the opposition raising that age-old friends and family accusation, saying this budget is all about funneling money to those close to the government.
Right.
But the article we're looking at actually pushes back on that with some pretty specific examples.
Yeah, they do. So they point to the planned distribution of 50,000 house lots, which would make a huge dent in the affordable housing shortage. That's potentially impacting hundreds of thousands of people right there. And then there's the nearly 4,000 small and medium contractors who are going to benefit from these investments, many of them based in areas that typically support the opposition.
And here's something that really jumped out at me. The article highlights that scholarships are being awarded to thousands of Guyanese students. And they're specifically saying that these scholarships are being given out regardless of race or political affiliation.
That's interesting.
It seems like a direct attempt to counter those accusations of favoritism.
Yeah.
And demonstrate a commitment to inclusivity.
It does suggest an effort to spread the benefits beyond just a select few. But again, it all comes down to implementation.
Yeah.
Will these programs really be accessible to all Guyanese? How will they be managed and overseen?
Right. The devil's often in the details.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got billions for infrastructure, billions for social programs. It all sounds good on paper. But what about the everyday realities for people on the ground?
Yeah.
The cost of living is a major concern for many Guyanese. What's this budget doing to address that?
The article outlines a few key measures aimed at easing that burden. There's a $9 billion allocation for targeted relief, though the details of how that money will be spent are still a bit vague.
Yeah, that lack of clarity is definitely something to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Transparency will be key in making sure these funds are used effectively and that they actually reach the people who need them the most.
Right.
The budget also gets rid of the excise tax on fuel and petroleum products.
Okay.
Which should help out a bit with prices at the pumps.
That's got to be good news for anyone who drives or relies on transportation, you know? Those fuel costs can really add up.
For sure.
But it's not just about fuel though, right? What about folks on a fixed income?
Well, the old age pension is going up. from $36,000 to $41,000 a month.
Okay.
That's an extra $5,000 every month for senior citizens.
Which could make a real difference in their day-to-day lives.
Yeah, that's a pretty good increase, especially when you consider how much the price of food and other essentials has gone up.
Yeah.
What about families with kids in school, though?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, those expenses can be a real burden on a budget.
Absolutely. So, Because We Care education grant is getting a big boost as well. It's going up to $50,000 per student.
Wow.
Now add that to the $5,000 uniform allowance, and that means over 200,000 students will be getting $55,000 to help with their education costs.
That's incredible. That's a huge help for families, especially those with multiple kids.
Yeah.
Might not cover everything, of course, but it's definitely got to take some of the pressure off. But, as we're talking about all these big spending plans, I keep coming back to the same question. Is this all sustainable?
Uh-huh.
This budget seems to be relying pretty heavily on oil revenue. What if those oil prices tank?
That is the million-dollar question. It's the classic issue for countries that have a lot of natural resources. How do you not fall into that resource curse trap?
Resource curse.
What is that?
It's this thing where countries that are rich in resources like oil or minerals actually end up in a worse situation economically and politically because of things like mismanagement, corruption, and a failure to diversify their economies.
Oh.
Think about Venezuela, for example. They have the world's largest oil reserves, but their economy is a mess because of decades of bad leadership and being overly reliant on oil.
Oh, wow.
Guyana needs to learn from their mistakes and make sure they use this oil money wisely.
So it's not just about spending the money, it's about spending it the right way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They need to invest in a future that goes beyond oil.
Right.
Things like renewable energy, sustainable agriculture, and building a more diverse economy. This budget does take a few steps in the right direction.
Okay.
But it's really important that they don't put all their eggs in one basket. That's a good point. It's like they're building a house on a shaky foundation.
Yeah.
No matter how nice the house is, if that foundation crumbles, the whole thing comes crashing down.
That's a great analogy. This budget is the foundation for Guyana's future.
Right.
And they need to make sure it's built on solid ground. They need to put money into education, healthcare, and infrastructure.
Right.
But also things like good governance, transparency, and environmental protection.
Right. Speaking of environmental protection, I'm really curious to hear what you think about that part of the budget.
Okay.
Guyana is famous for its pristine rainforests.
Yeah.
How does this budget deal with the challenge of balancing economic growth with taking care of the environment?
That's a big question, and one that often gets missed in the rush for economic growth.
Yeah.
Guyana has a globally significant rainforest. It's incredibly biodiverse and plays a vital role in regulating the climate.
Yeah.
But expanding the oil industry, if it's not done carefully, could seriously threaten this delicate ecosystem. We're talking deforestation, habitat loss, pollution, and the release of greenhouse gases.
Yeah, so those are the risks. But what about the budget itself? Does it offer any solutions or ways to lessen those risks?
Well, there are some encouraging signs. The budget sets aside funds for renewable energy projects, conservation efforts, and promoting sustainable forestry practices.
Okay.
They're talking about moving towards a low-carbon economy, investing in solar and hydropower, and encouraging ecotourism.
So they are at least acknowledging the importance of environmental protection. It's not just about drilling for oil and ignoring the consequences.
It seems like they're starting to realize that economic development and environmental sustainability have to go together.
Yeah.
But the devil's always in the details. How will these plans actually be put into practice? Are the funds enough to make a real difference? Will there be strong environmental rules to stop the oil industry from causing damage that can't be fixed? Those are all things that need to be closely watched.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And what about the indigenous communities? They're the ones who really know and care for the rainforest.
Yeah.
Are they included in these plans for a greener future?
That's a really important point. Indigenous communities have a deep understanding of the rainforest and how everything is connected.
Yeah.
They need to be leading any conservation efforts.
Right.
The budget does mention working with Indigenous communities, recognizing their traditional knowledge and their vital role in protecting the environment.
Okay.
There's money for things like land titling, sustainable development projects, and programs to help them manage their resources better.
So it's not just about the government telling people what to do. It's about giving local communities the power to protect their own lands and how they make a living.
Exactly.
That sounds really promising. But, sometimes these big promises end up being more talk than action.
Yeah.
How can we be sure that these environmental commitments will actually lead to real change?
Accountability is key. Civil society organizations, independent monitoring, and transparent reporting are all crucial to make sure that the money is actually used for what it's supposed to be used for and that environmental rules are being enforced. The international community also has a part to play in holding Guyana accountable to its environmental commitments.
So it's a team effort then. It involves the government, the people of Guyana, and the global community.
Yes.
We all have a responsibility to make sure that this oil boom doesn't end up destroying Guyana's incredible natural environment.
Mm-hmm. This has been such an interesting look into Guyana's 2025 budget.
It has.
And I think we've covered a lot.
We have.
Before we wrap up, I'd like to touch on one more thing from this budget that I found particularly interesting. The focus on small and medium enterprises.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That's something that often gets overlooked in these big budget discussions. But supporting a strong and diverse private sector is so important for long-term economic growth. The article talks about nearly 4,000 small and medium contractors getting a boost from these public investments. Many of them are from areas that usually support the opposition.
Yeah, that's important. It suggests they're trying to spread the benefits beyond the usual groups and create opportunities for businesses no matter their political stance.
Yeah.
If they can successfully build a thriving entrepreneurial environment, it could lead to a more fair and resilient economy.
It's not just about giving out money. It's about giving people the tools to create their own wealth and opportunity.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment where new ideas can grow and small businesses can expand and create jobs. That's a crucial part of sustainable development.
This budget is like a giant puzzle, isn't it?
Kind of.
So many different pieces all connected and affecting each other.
Yeah.
We've got infrastructure, healthcare, education, social programs, environmental protection, economic diversification. It's a lot.
It is. It definitely is.
To keep track of.
And it's a puzzle that's still being put together. This budget is a plan, but the journey is just beginning. The real challenge will be in how it's put into action, how well these funds are used, how transparent everything is, and whether they can truly deliver on the promise of a better and more sustainable future for all Guyanese.
It's an unfolding story.
It is.
And we'll be watching to see what happens in the coming months and years. It's amazing to think about everything in this budget and how it's all connected. We've covered so much.
We have.
From these huge infrastructure projects to those targeted cost of living things.
Yeah.
But one thing that really sticks with me is the whole question of Guyana's incredible natural resources, especially those pristine rainforests. I mean, it's a balancing act, isn't it?
Sure.
Trying to harness the economic potential of this oil industry, while at the same time trying to safeguard these precious ecosystems for the future.
It's a challenge a lot of countries face, weighing economic growth against environmental protection. And for Guyana, the stakes are really high. We're talking about a rainforest that's like a global treasure. It's a hot spot for biodiversity, and it plays a huge role in regulating our planet's climate.
Right, but the oil boom brings the potential for deforestation, habitat loss, pollution.
Right, all those things we worry about when we think about extractive industries.
Exactly. So how does this budget address those worries? Are there any concrete steps to kind of mitigate those risks and make sure Guyana's natural heritage is protected?
There are a few promising things outlined in the budget. For example, there's funding for renewable energy projects, which is a step towards relying less on fossil fuels.
Yeah.
They're also putting money into sustainable forestry practices, promoting ecotourism, and talking about a low-carbon economy.
It sounds like they're at least recognizing that they need to balance economic development with environmental protection.
Right. It's not just full steam ahead with oil and ignoring the consequences.
Yeah, exactly. So that's good.
Right.
That's definitely a positive sign. But again, the real test is in how it's all put into action.
How will this money actually be used? Will there be strong environmental safeguards in place to stop the oil industry from causing damage that can't be reversed?
Yeah, those are important questions that need to be looked at carefully.
For sure.
And what about the people who know the rainforest the best? The indigenous communities have been living in harmony with nature for generations.
Yeah.
Are they involved in these plans for a greener future?
That's a really important point. Indigenous communities have so much traditional knowledge about the rainforest and its delicate balance.
Yeah.
They need to be active participants in any conservation efforts.
Not just passive bystanders.
Right.
So it's more than just policies coming from the government.
Exactly.
It's about giving local communities the power to be stewards of their own lands and resources.
Exactly. And the budget does have some things for that.
Okay.
There's funding for land titling for Indigenous communities, which helps secure their rights to their traditional lands. There's also support for sustainable development projects that are led by Indigenous communities and programs to help them build their capacity to manage their resources better.
Those are all encouraging signs. But I keep thinking back to that whole accountability thing.
Yeah.
How can we be sure these environmental commitments aren't just empty promises?
Right.
How can we hold their feet to the fire and make sure they're actually following through on these pledges to protect the environment?
That's where civil society organizations come in. They need to be the watchdogs, monitoring how these environmental initiatives are being implemented, holding the government accountable, and speaking out if they see any backsliding or attempts to weaken those environmental protections.
So it's not just the government's job then. It's a team effort involving civil society.
Right.
The people of Guyana and even the international community, we all share the responsibility to make sure this oil boom doesn't come at the cost of Guyana's incredible natural heritage.
Yeah.
This has been such an eye-opening look at Guyana's 2025 budget.
It really has.
We've talked about so much, from economic projections and social programs to the really crucial question of environmental sustainability.
It's a complex and multifaceted budget for sure. It really reflects the challenges and opportunities that Guyana is facing at this important time.
Yeah.
They have a chance to build a better and fairer society, but it needs careful planning, smart investments, and a commitment to being open and accountable.
It's like a story that's still being written.
Absolutely.
And it's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out in the years to come. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Guyana's 2025 budget. We hope you found it informative and something to think about.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those minds open.